Hello and welcome to This Week at the Movies. I'm Matt.
I'm Eric.
And this week we transition from kind of an indie biopic to, how did you put it just a minute ago? The most blockbustery blockbuster of all blockbusters. We are diving right back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe with their third and final release of 2023 in theatrical release of 2023, The Marvels, the follow-up to 2019's Captain Marvel and 2022's Miss Marvel TV series, brings three heroes together to fight the Kree. Eric, we've seen kind of a mixed bag of reactions for Marvel films this year. Guardians 3 was genuinely well received. Ant-Man 3, not as much. The Marvels seemed to be the subject of a lot of criticism before it had even released. How did you feel about the film?
Okay, so what is there to say whenever a Marvel movie comes out? There was a one-dimensional villain. Most of the scenes were shot with flat lighting so they could get as much coverage as possible so they can make the movie as much in post-production as possible. And yet, and the costume designs have been a lot more colorful and comic book friendly rather than more grounded in reality. And there were a lot of jokes, and every once in a while, I thought the tone of this was pretty even, so I didn't feel like the jokes undercut any serious moments or tension. But I think those are the kind of things that people are used to hearing about Marvel movies at this point. What you're getting with this that I think works really, really well, and to me was worth the price of admission, was a follow-up to Miss Marvel, the TV show. And what I feel like I missed was a sequel to Captain Marvel. And I wasn't even a huge super fan of Captain Marvel, but we'll talk about that later. But there's this strong base of fandom and a colorful introduction to a character whose full family were invested in, and she gets tied up with her powers, with two other characters who have similar powers. The characters are Photon or Monica Rambeau, Carol Danvers or Captain Marvel, and Miss Marvel, or I get her,
Kamala
I get
Khan.
the Kamala Khan, not Iman Vellani. Yeah. Basically the same person, but yeah, it's amazing. She was like a huge fan of being Miss Marvel before, and then got to play Miss Marvel, and now is getting a hand in writing the continuation of the comics. She really is getting to live like a dream out with this. But and you see it, and that heart is genuinely there, and I could feel that. But that is like a third to half of the movie. I thought some of the stuff with Monica Rambeau also worked really well. The things that didn't work so well for me, unfortunately, was the villain, played by Zawe Ashton. That was somebody else.
Yeah, who is actually either the fiance or the wife of Tom Hiddleston, who plays Loki.
Yes.
They said it was the first time a husband and wife team have had their Marvel projects debut on the same day, because the finale of Loki season 2 dropped on Friday as well.
Yep. So, yeah, there are things in this movie as great as Samuel L. Jackson at his peak as comedic relief, and some really enjoyable moments of a hero getting to be that comic book person come to life that comes from being with Miss Marvel. And then there are scenes like a scene that is going to become notorious for me in history, where the characters escape a fight from the bad guy, go to a nameless planet covered in nothing but grass as far as the eyes can see. The ship crashes, they land, they confront Captain Marvel. She exposition dumps everything that is important about her character that she hasn't shared with the character so far, about her feeling guilty about having basically destroyed a planet, and about why she didn't come back. And they have these emotional beats, and like in a minute and a half, they try and fit an entire movie's worth of character development. And then, even though the ship crashed when they landed, they just leave. And what? Like, it's very bizarre to me, because there are things in this movie that I want to say, like, I want to give this a thumbs up. But I was thinking about what like a thoughtful, human, relatable, emotional movie Priscilla was from just last week. And also watching some other people's reviews has kind of changed my outlook, and I realized I did something last week that I don't like to do, which is to criticize a movie for what it's not rather than what it is. And I still don't know how I would feel about that, but I can't in good conscience rate that movie a thumbs down and rate this movie one thumb up for the good parts of it. So I think I'm just gonna like retroactively say that was a thumb up for an entirely different reason. That this movie I give one thumb up, and I think they managed to salvage a decent amount of entertainment into an hour and a half out of a project that was probably a little bloated and longer. And I think it's worth a fun time in the theater, and I wouldn't want to discourage someone who might enjoy themselves. Even as a comic book fan, there are some deep, weird reaches in here, like when it comes to the dance planet and whatnot. That is
Okay.
not just
That
canon.
might have been my favorite 15 minutes of the entire movie.
And it is those moments when Marvel does best, where they say like, you know what, screw what might appeal to everyone in the world. Here's this weird little niche thing that some people think is interesting from the comics. Let's explore that and put that out and see what that does. And I usually think they're rewarded when they do that. So yeah, I think there are some well-founded criticisms, and people who enjoy themselves are entitled to enjoy themselves. And so it's okay, but there are some seriously bad things in this movie, but I think the good overall outweighed the bad for the experience.
If you didn't like The Singing Planet, there's an entire Zack Snyder universe of DC films for you.
Yeah, fair.
And you can just walk right off the Marvel pier. There's a couple of things to talk about, and we will, as Eric mentioned, we'll look at Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel, the show, which are actually two incredibly polarizing and low-rated projects for a lot of people. Probably not for the two of us, but a lot of people had Captain Marvel, the original film, at the bottom of their list of Marvel films, which I think is insane. Miss Marvel, people have noted, was the lowest rated, I think, of the TV series that they've had, which I also think
She-Hulk being out.
I also think is insane. I'd actually pinged a little higher. I think those things are insane. We can talk about that later. I also think there's a larger discussion to have about Marvel in general, that they're fighting with themselves. But I will start with this movie, and I'm giving it a solid thumb up. I enjoyed it a lot for what it is. There are a couple. I do agree with you. They did not add enough depth to the villain, and I think that really did Zoe Aston a disservice, because she's just basically anger and bitter and one note all the way through to the end when she gets incinerated. Thanks for playing. Glad you were here. But I will say there are a couple, the criticism that got thrown at this, people were hot against this from the beginning. And I don't know if it's because it's all female characters or because it's something that they just wanted to dunk on, but definitely didn't deserve like the pre-criticism, or I think even some of the harsher criticisms that I've seen. There is one thing I will say, there has been a big part of the discussion is, this movie got blamed for hosing Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which got pulled up in the schedule because the Marvels was supposed to release in that window, but needed more time for special VFX. And they pulled up Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which got slammed for some of its VFX work. I don't really care about that argument very much, but I will say, I did feel in watching this movie that it aired out of sequence, because we've seen Secret Invasion and there is no part of Nick Fury's storyline, the storyline with the Skrulls that she interacts with, that feels right based on what we saw in Secret Invasion and how we know that plays a role in Avengers Secret Wars. So it is semi-apparent that show, having dropped in the summer, that they probably did originally mean for this film to go first quarter or first half of 2023. and then you would have seen kind of, it would make much more sense to me that the Skrulls were especially bent out of shape on Earth with Nick Fury and with Carol Danvers, because she basically destroyed their home again, or was an active participant in their home getting destroyed and them getting kind of voiced off. And you leave with them going, presumably all that colony going to Earth, because that's where New Thor planet is, where they put them on Earth. And when you have Tessa Thompson show up to find them a home, is she doing what she did for Asgard? Because New Asgard is like an island in,
which begs the question, if the entire catalyst of the point of Secret Invasion, which I'll admit I haven't watched, it is probably the one Marvel project that I haven't watched. If the entire thing is the Skrulls are upset because no one found them a home, and in this movie, the simple answer is just live on Earth. What was that whole show about?
Well, yeah. So this is the first time that I would say their pieces of IP in sharing a larger universe are really clashing, because Secret Invasion is Nick Fury's show. Now, that didn't take away from my enjoyment of this film. Which the other thing I'm going to say about this film is I feel about this the same way people came after Thor Love and Thunder last year. I think either the style and what they tried to do worked for you or it didn't. I mean, people dunked on Thor Love and Thunder, and I think there was a lot of that where they just didn't care about what they were doing with the characters, and that it was a different, more fun tone, and that it did some weird things and took you to some weird places. Thor Love and Thunder, despite the fact that we had Christian Bale in there, also has a semi two-dimensional villain. You might have a more polished actor who maybe was able to make a little bit more out of the pieces of his plot, but they didn't really give Gorr a whole lot of storyline. You either liked it because you loved the interplay between the main characters and the way they were reconciling, coming back together. I felt a lot of pieces of that, especially between Carol and Monica Rambeau, where you're delving into that relationship that was broken by a 30-year absence. I know you weren't super pumped they landed on the grass planet for what was essentially exposition. Those were actually some nice scenes back and forth with them. I liked their training and learning to work together. I liked the way that they added a little bit more personality. So in the film Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers has personality, but the way that they injected her into Avengers, not great, Bob. Especially since they made it seem like it was going to be important as we came into Endgame, and you're like, not feeling the importance here. I thought they injected a little more personality, some teamwork. I liked the things with Goose and the other baby cats. That some of that was hilarious. Kamala's family remains hilarious. I guess it depends a little bit on what you're expecting from these movies and whether you want to be entertained. And I think this is where we're bumping up against, I heard another podcast I enjoyed the watch talking about Marvel kind of at this point in time with 15 almost years of IP out there. They're almost victims of their own success and creating this expectation built on an idea that in 2008 we were still trying to figure out, what do you mean you're going to have all this interconnected world of films that's going to lead to like a super team? Well, then you went through 11 years to get to Endgame, and it was always going to be something of a letdown after Endgame. And it's totally fair to note that we had seen 10 theatrical releases prior to the Marvels from the MCU since Endgame. And you know what? When I was looking back at them, there are not a lot of exceptional winners. The ones that work get to you in some emotional way. And, this made an emotional connection, and I enjoyed the comedy here. I enjoyed what they were trying to do. And so it worked okay. But what is concerning to me is there's been a lot of talk now that because they're not seeing the huge box office returns, and because they're unsure creatively both about the reception to the character Kang and the unfortunate series of
Or-
events with
yeah.
Jonathan Majors, what they're going to do, that they're going to use this multiversal thing to bring back Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson and Jeremy Renner and Mark Ruffalo and Chris
Oh,
Hemsworth, and
I
they're
don't-
just going to, well, there is,
I don't think there's a
some
doubt in
serious-
mind that they were going to do that for Secret Wars.
I don't know though. I'm more interested. So this movie ends with a post-credit scene that gives you a glimpse
things.
of Young Avengers potentially.
Mhm.
I think if they let some of these, if they made a few more compelling stories, maybe had more of a compelling villain. I mean, think about the first Avengers. Loki, still a huge part of the MCU. You invested in that character and were invested in that character as much as you were in the other characters. I just don't know if they're doing a good enough job about letting these worlds build and letting you invest in them and giving them somebody that's a worthy foil. Even Thanos and what Josh Brolin did and the way that stretched out. If you look at the one Avengers film that sort of had fallen flat is Ultron, and that's because they didn't develop Ultron enough for you to care.
See, that's the thing. I think it is simpler than all of this Marvel stuff. I think what happened is COVID happened. It started crunching and they started making stupid decisions with the way that they handled their special effects teams. And it started to mess with their schedule and it threw off their plan, the way that their plans got thrown off around Civil War. But their method of correcting around the time of Civil War still pushed them in a strong direction towards Endgame because they had a clear plan they could hold on to. But with them splitting Disney and trying to tie stories into TV shows and all this kind of stuff, I think Doctor Strange and Spider-Man No Way Home were the first movies to flip places. And they had to edit and reshoot scenes in order to make those two movies not work. If you flip them and you consider the idea of the stories and you consider a much slower introduction of branching multiversal incidents happening, you can kind of actually piece together and see what's going on. But the problem is, they've gotten to a place so far along a broken plan that they are having to edit the Marvels. You either like it, and so you're not going to question a lot of things, and you're going to find a reason to like it, or you don't like it, which is going to make all of these cracks. Like the very beginning, the three characters start switching places. Well, Goose the Flurkin grabs some enemies and throws them up in Miss Marvel's home. That's how bad guys get from one location to another. So how do they get on board Nick Fury's ship? Nobody knows because it's an editing error from something that was clearly messed up before. I don't know.
One of them was holding on.
Does that happen later? Because they're literally like teleporting. Like I guess not where they're holding.
It's one of her teleports. Either that or it was something like Kamala. Oh, they got trapped when Kamala made her orb ball. She was trying to make a
Kamala
shield defense
took him with the Flurkin, then went back with her shield and then took him back.
No, she got put back on the ship and she tried to use her light powers to make a shield, and those guys came from behind her and it ended up in the ball. But then she got transported to
Great. So there. So if you like a scene and you enjoy it, you find a way to do that. Now, I have a question for you, Zoe Ashton, her villain character. When did she have the time to learn who Captain Marvel was personally and what planets are important to her? About 2/3 of the way through the movie, they mentioned that was her target.
It's been 30 years of her plotting against Captain Marvel, so and Captain
against
Marvel
the Annihilator,
is pretty
sure,
well known.
But she's also been trying to save the planet constantly and fighting against Skrulls and fighting a civil war the entire time. So when did she abandon the Civil War and not be the leader of her people and spend some time researching? Does she go to this planet? Does she go to this planet? Like
both of the first two planets that they go to, they mentioned were Kree colonies.
Mm-hmm.
So they would know them. Same
they
way
would know
the
who.
the nation of England understands what's happening in India and Australia and the places that were their colonies.
Okay, so
They basically said those two planets had previously been Kree colonies that were part of the Kree Empire that they kind of let go of directly holding on to them as part of the Civil War, but they would have known what happened there, and they would know that. I don't think that's as hard to follow as you're making it out to be.
I mean,
And
she doesn't
they
even
knew
have
who
memories
they
of
knew
her
who
own life growing up on Earth before the events of that, and so I
but the
understand that
Kree
it's been
knew who
30 years,
Carol
like
Danvers was the all the Kree knew who she was. She didn't know who she was because they wiped her memory.
right. But the creature that knows who she was and the people involved in like making her memories go away are dead.
But that the character played by Zoe Aston was the like
Was there
number two to the Supreme when she
30 years
destroyed it.
ago?
Yeah, did you not see
Oh.
that scene when she destroys
No, I
the
saw when
Supreme
she was there
and
in the past, the
collapses the
beam
sit?
collapses on her, and I
Yeah,
thought they made it look like she was one of the many Kree that gets knocked away in the background because she's younger and among the ranks of other creatures. I don't remember her saying anything about being the number 2 of anything.
I took it from there back and forth that she was important, and that's what pushed her into a leadership position when
Ah,
they
that's
started the
cool.
Civil War.
Well, there you go. I mean, like, great. So, yeah, there's more that I can go on, and there's probably more explanations for all of it. But yeah, you have
Well, it was a lot of like quick exposition, and the fact that you were jumping around so much trying to do exposition. I also Monica Rambeau's character and her getting powers is sort of a minor piece of a very Elizabeth Olsen focused series that happened now 3 years ago.
yeah,
Because that was the first of the Marvel series, WandaVision.
yeah,
Wasn't it? I thought it was
2021.
2020.
Now they got Marvel did nothing 2020.
Nothing theatrical. But Disney Plus launched in November of 2019, and I was pretty sure that the Marvel series started going in their second year.
I just looked up Miss Marvel.
Miss Marvel is definitely 2022. But like Loki was 2021.
January 2021.
Okay, so. But that's still, I mean, that is still almost 3 years ago at this point in time.
Yeah, just about.
And we haven't really seen Monica Rambeau be part of anything that I totally recall since then.
Nope. We saw this X-Men related version of her mom in Doctor Strange 2, but that was about it.
Which we get more of that. Which that also begged the question of what world they're in. Because after the events of Doctor Strange, they can't be in that one.
That's true.
All those people not around.
And I think that's
the
a problem.
Is completely jacked.
Yeah.
Well, it does make you realize Deadpool 3 with all of the characters and pieces they're pulling in has got to be part of this larger multiversal story too.
Mm-hmm.
Which
yeah, absolutely.
To be...
Well, straight up behind the scenes videos is him and Wolverine fighting on the ruins of the 20th Century Fox logo in the background. There's no way it's not about him in the Fox universe versus the Marvel universe. Like that's something that is not a well-kept secret. If it was trying to be kept
struggle is they've just retconned everything that has been made off of a Marvel property in the last basically 30 years into this larger MCU. That's going to be even harder to keep track of because, all those old Sony Spider-Man movies and all the ancillary movies, you don't know which world it's part of, or now, thanks to Loki, you don't even understand what the concept of timelines is You know,
Mhm.
I don't know if you were tracking that series, but I don't even know where they go
I don't know, but Sony's
from
trying to
there.
come at it through Across the Spider-Verse and try and put everything into place, but how much are they working with Marvel, who seems to be doing their own thing? So,
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So there have been 3 theatrical releases this year: Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Guardians 3, and the Marvels. I would say we both probably still have Guardians 3 at the top, but how would you rank the other 2 for you?
oh, the Marvels and then Quantumania very
Yeah.
low.
Yeah, that's probably my ranking too. I had high hopes for Quantumania. I mean I like this more than Quantumania. I liked it more than Shazam: Fury of the Gods, which you referenced. I can't remember which other movie you compared
Well,
it to,
I
but
referenced Shazam because that movie has like it's another movie from this year that sort of has a nice movie in it around Jack Dylan Grazer's character. Just like Miss Marvel's movie within the Marvels is like pretty solid. I really like her bit. And then the other one I was comparing to was Blue Beetle when it comes to trying to take like a cultural look at things and bring a family into the mix and
I
ride the
almost
humor
think
out.
I would have liked the Marvels as a short Marvel series.
Yeah, I wish Miss Marvel was a movie, and I wish The Marvels was the series on Disney Plus.
Yeah, that almost probably would have been more interesting because you'd probably get an episode where you really understood Zoe Aston's character. Because I think the pieces to some of the questions that you have were actually in there, but the way that they're all laid out,
Oh, I'm
you
trusting
have
you
to
because
you have to
again,
be paying some pretty
I didn't
solid
see it twice.
attention to the things. Well, I only saw it once too, but
No, but I am bad
there
at
are
that.
some places where they are talking this you do have a point that there was a lot of exposition in this.
Yeah.
There was probably more exposition in this movie to explain people, places, time, and events than there is in a lot of the recent Marvel movies, because especially considering that these are established characters. But you are right, like Captain Marvel, when you leave her at the end of her first movie, which we can just transition to
Mm-hmm.
talking about, Captain Marvel 2019. When you have this kind of introduction, where you leave her is still back in the 90s.
Mm.
And she pops up. I thought she was going to be an important piece of Endgame because they sure as heck made it seem like that. And you get her introduced at the beginning of Endgame, but like the people that blipped, she's pretty much gone
Yeah.
until the end of Endgame. And then we've heard
Yeah.
references about her, but we have not seen her, I don't think, in anything since that.
And I am satisfied by the explanation that the same hurt that you're experiencing on the world is being experienced on other worlds, and they don't have the Avengers to help them. So it's like, okay, fine. You don't, yeah, like, but it's like it is kind of weird
But
because
when
Carol Danvers
until
is such an
Monica
interesting
kind of
character.
mentions in this movie that, you just disappeared for 30 years, it's like, ah, that's a fair point, because
Yeah.
for us, it wasn't a 30-year disappearance because you saw Captain Marvel in what, March of 2019, and then by May, you're into Avengers Endgame. That was literally the last piece before Avengers Endgame, because you see
Hey,
it referenced in the post-scene credits of Infinity War.
mhm.
You see the symbol, and that's, everybody knew that was coming. And then she was like spring right in front of Endgame.
Yeah.
And so, it wasn't that long, but then Carol, you just, or Monica, you just never came back for 30 years.
Yeah.
Huh, that's true.
Yeah. And then when you showed up, you dipped again for another 5 years.
Well, but
um.
Monica dipped also, like,
Yeah, that's
evaporated.
true. She was
I
like,
almost
oh
forgot
wait.
that part of her backstory too, because that was such again, a small referenced piece of, and when you're seeing her character in WandaVision, I don't think you realize, this sounds about how important that's going to be, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah,
You know,
yeah, no, I 100%. Like it's
you don't realize like you need to retain all this, and this is going to be really crucial to something
yeah.
going
They
forward.
they made they made so much in WandaVision feel like it was supposed to be mystery boxes when they probably should have more played up the significance of things rather than being like, "Ooh, maybe you're gonna care about this," and then disappearing for 3 years. Yeah,
But I liked Captain Marvel in some ways for the same reason that I liked the Marvels. There was a sense of humor, and there were some funny cultural references, and you had some fun stuff with her back and forth with Nick Fury.
yeah.
I'm,
So I'm not a fan. And I did rewatch Captain Marvel, split up a little bit, but it's weird. I have the same opinion as I did for the Ant-Man movies with this, which is I think at the time in this constant stream of releases, like not looking at it as its own product, but as something in the middle of the flow of everything else that comes out during the year, I didn't really appreciate some of the creativity, some of the work that goes into behind the scenes of making things look naturalistic and my main core issue with the story is she's a character who's like she's a hero who's like I don't have to change, and she learns that she's right, she does not have to change. And it's like that's that's to me normally a beat in a story, not like an entire story. Like it's sort of loosely a mystery of who is really the bad guy and who has trapped her and who is really treating her well and not. And it's a labyrinth built for her to learn one simple truth, which is that no, yeah, I should use my powers on this person, and then boom, they're gone. And that is sort of an issue. It's like the Superman issue for DC. You have to sort of come up with a narrative that sort of nerfs the character for what their abilities are, because she is borderline invincible. So in order to you can't just do the thing where you sap some of her powers away, or that's going to become tiresome. So you have to create like a compelling story. But it's just when you watch a story about a hero becoming a hero and overcoming something, and the only thing that there is to overcome is just figuring out where to point your powers, I like that is extremely reductive, and there is more to the movie than I had given it credit for originally. And it is by no means towards like the bottom of the barrel. Like when there is,
I have it kind of in the soft middle.
yeah, like it's not as bad as people make it out to be. It's just that the way they decided to play the character, like together, Brie Larson and the team and whatnot, was just a character who is so self-confident that they don't have to take the gravity of the situation all that seriously. And that's when you get some of the jokiness and some of the like flavor of Marvel in there. But then also like, what are the stakes? So like, there's just some things in it to me that just like,
You mean you
again,
never worried that Samuel L. Jackson's character might die in the 90s?
right, right. So yeah, and there's
Or
things
that
like
Phil
that. Like
Coulson might die in the 90s?
you can't help but like, and to me, I can't help but contrast the gravity of the moment where in Winter Soldier, Samuel L. Jackson says, "Last time I trusted a person, I lost an eye," and then they turn that into a punchline that a cat scratched his eye, and it's sort of like, okay, so this is where we're going.
Maybe they forgot about the Winter Soldier line.
Yeah, like and that's the idea of maybe they forgot. When that starts to float around in my mind, it feels kind of like but I don't think so. I again, for what, and reviewing it for what it is versus what it isn't, I like the movie a lot better. But I'm kind of neutral on it. I can take it or leave it. It's not really, yeah.
So the other piece of this is Aman Vellani, who I think was probably one of the best parts of the Marvels film, who played the part of Miss Marvel in that 2022 TV series. I did look it up. It's not that it was the lowest rate; it was the least watched Marvel
Yeah,
series of
which is
all
a
time when it
shame.
came out, which is a shame. But I remember the criticisms about these two were not big projects, but I actually enjoyed the series. Did you enjoy it?
I really enjoyed this series. I felt like the way they built the sets for her to be on felt very like classic superhero movie. It felt like your Raimi and old X-Men kind of like crafted like little worlds to live in. I love the adaptation they made of her powers and the lore they gave her, and the family element and the time traveling. Like all of this stuff felt like a natural product of telling a story about a person rather than, well, we have to hit time travel, we have to hit these things because they're in the comics, and so we come up with a story to meet that halfway. It just felt like they did a really great superhero origin story with a long enough time for all of those beats to breathe. And that's why I kind of still think it would have worked pretty well as like a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
I think you could just consolidate that into that. But yeah, if people have missed out on it, you're missing out on like one of the better startup origin story movies in the Marvel universe.
Doing a 2-hour movie or like 2 hours and 15 minutes isn't actually that big of a stretch for a lot of these 6 episode series that are closer to a half hour an episode.
Yeah.
Like this wasn't one of the longer kind of beat episodes. We've had a few where they were an hour or so, and you get closer to 4 hours for the whole series. But this one probably, if you took out the 12 minutes of credits that they have on each of these episodes, probably wouldn't be that far off of like 2 hours and 45 minutes of content. You could trim that slightly down.
The only criticism I think I would like really level at it is it feels like the creativity tapers off over the course of the show. Where you start with like such a strong like visual style and tone to things, and then it sort of turns into she's in a costume, she's a superhero and whatnot. But I think that's always sort of been a criticism. Like this movie is the espionage thriller of Marvel, and this movie is the space opera version of Marvel. But like by the time it gets to the third act, they're all kind of the same thing. So,
So they obviously tease out at the end of the Marvels that what might be next for her being the Young Avengers. We see her connect with Kate Bishop, which I actually enjoyed that Hawkeye series a lot for the back and forth between Hawkeye and Kate Bishop. The other potential members of that, Cassie Lang. I know I'm forgetting one that was in the picture. Obviously Ironheart, who we got kind of backdoor introduction to in Black Panther 2. It's supposed to have a series. We will wait and see if that ever develops. But what is your interest level for
Young Avengers? I am happy to champion it for a new audience that is going to get what I got out of Marvel growing up, as long as they stick to the core reason for telling these stories as like child-friendly power fantasies that allow people to feel like they can overcome obstacles and feel empowered. I would be super excited to support it. I'm not as heavily invested in the characters, but I've also gone into movies where I didn't know who the Guardians of the Galaxy were. I didn't ever really care about Captain America before the movie. When Marvel is at their best, they do a great job of giving you a reason to watch this story that makes you care about this character moving forward and gets you invested in things. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's going to definitely be interesting. You have a few of these different groups that they're potentially branching off, that they're still working on Fantastic Four. All the dancing around the edges makes you think that in some way the X-Men are going to appear sooner rather than later. We have the Thunderbolts that we already know are coming.
I would regret not bringing up something that I think was a long-running rumor with this. And, at the end of Miss Marvel, they revealed she's a mutant. At the end of the Marvels, there is another special tease. And it is core to the character Rogue from X-Men's story that most of her powers are from Carol Danvers. It's the consequence of using her absorption power on Carol Danvers. And for some reason, a lot of those powers, the flight, the strength, the things stuck with her. And those characters are tied, and it's so interesting that they keep tying these two parts of Marvel, like the Miss Marvel side of things and the X-Men side of things. They keep those close, and I'm really excited to see if there's like a payoff there, because you kind of keep accidentally associating these two. I think you kind of have to do something with that.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean, challenge accepted, Marvel says.
Yeah.
They might be throwing out all their plans just to be like, hey, can somebody get RDJ on the phone? We need him to come back from the dead.
Yeah. How
That's
long
my
until
only
the clock runs out and they're willing to pay for him?
Well, and I get that that might have always been the plan for Secret Wars. I never thought about it, but to me, I have mixed feelings. Like, as much as part of me would be pumped to see Iron Man and OG Captain America back, the emotional impact of ever being able to go back to Endgame and feel it the same way would be burned.
Yeah, it would be lessened.
And Endgame right now is for me a top 5 Marvel entry. I don't know that I want to see them resurrect. And we had it was already hard to watch the Black Widow movie after Scarlett Johansson's hero death, so
it still feels really weird looking at a shelf and seeing Black Widow after Endgame. Like, it just doesn't feel right. It's bizarre.
Well, and actually that's probably one of the victims of them getting off kilter, because that movie was supposed to come out before Civil War.
Or yeah.
Before, because it's like a direct lead-in
to Infinity War. She gets the jacket, the blonde hair, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's like right in between the two of them. Yeah.
Yeah, Infinity War. That's what I forgot. Yeah, and so I don't know. That's the problem when you have a large interconnected set of world building things. If something gets tilted off, I mean, DC didn't even build as large and interconnected of a world, and you already have seen some cracks in that. I love the interviews with James Wan, and they're like, we shot it like 75 different ways because we didn't know if we were coming out before the Flash or after the Flash, or if we were coming out before Justice League, and like, cool.
Yeah. I never told you that I finally saw the post credits sequence of the Flash that seemingly says that he left the Clooney universe and is back in the Snyderverse
when he's with Momoa.
Yeah,
that's
that is
weird.
What?
Well, it's also kind of I'm not saying it's not amusing.
Does that mean his dad is back in jail?
Or is it just saying that Momoa is Aquaman in every variation?
See, I love that. I'll go with that. But
I just wonder if Marvel's going to look back and regret a little bit deciding to branch into a multiverse.
I'm sure they're going to start moving away from it. I doubt that anyone involved has any regrets at this point. Like, it's not like they're hurting for a future, like, I don't think anyone is sitting here questioning shutting down the franchise or anything, so
but they are getting incredible diminishing returns, because
they are.
Well, 47 million sounds like a decent opening on a movie that probably cost you 200 to 300 million. It's not a great opening, and that's usually before they factor marketing. They'll eventually probably find a break even, but
I'll be interested to see what happens with the promotion of this movie now that the strike is over, to see if they come out late in the game and start having the actors do some post promotion of like, hey, go see this story before you miss the amazing opportunity to see it in theaters and all that kind of stuff.
That is true. It has been weird not having anyone out to do promotional tours and things like that. The last movies that probably had those kind of promotion was the Barbenheimer, which was the last high watermark in terms of theatrical, and then you just get random ones. Like, I still don't understand how Five Nights at Freddy's made more than the Marvels, even though it dropped on Peacock the same day and also is aggressively mediocre.
You saw it?
Oh, I've seen 772 things this year. Yes,
Yeah, I thought that would be enough.
I've actually gone back. The last time we did this, I had not seen Insidious, The Red Door, or The Nun 2. I have since seen both of those as well. Aggressively
sorry for one
mediocre
of
is
those.
also a word I would use to describe those films.
Yeah, pretty much.
But I guess there's just no accounting for what people want to watch.
Yeah.
Well, speaking
this
of
end of this
potentially,
year and the start of next year is going to be a fascinating ride because there are some studios
especially
that are
the
trying to
real
think
effects
they're
of the
done.
strike, you won't totally feel until 2024. Like my wife the other day, she's like, the strike's over, so when are our network shows going to come back? I'm like, maybe not this year.
Yeah. Or like, I think the first tweet from like Ryan Reynolds was that they're still going to try and have Deadpool 3 out by like July next year. And I'm like, there's no way that is going to happen. But if it does, like, what does that mean?
I mean, they were close to, I think, the end of shooting, but
Yeah, but I don't know.
There's
excited.
a lot of movies that were supposed to come out the latter half of this year that they held for that reason, like Dune.
Oh, yeah.
Which,
this is no longer the year of Dune Part 2.
Which you were excited for.
I
Well,
was.
we still have some interesting things, including a few blockbusters. We know we're still going to get a second Aquaman that may or may not have actual footage of Amber Heard. It's unclear from the trailer. And, we have another blockbuster reboot for next week, which is a return to the world of Panem in the Hunger Games Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
Yep.
The prequel that I don't think anyone asked for. But apparently we're getting anyway. This movie is supposed to make you feel some sort of way about Donald Sutherland's character. Yeah,
I can't imagine what. Yeah.
I have the same questions. And then realizing that it's the same lead actress that was in West Side Story, Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, which feels like it was released another decade ago.
Fury of the Gods.
I forgot she's in Shazam. That's right.
Fingers crossed.
Of all the movies ever made, this will be one of them.
This will be one of them.
But there'll be some interesting ones to end in November, and then obviously Thanksgiving week, one of the big releases, Napoleon, Apple's other big entry into the year-end awards. So some fun stuff coming out there. And in December, still trying to wrap my mind around the fact that it's been 20 years since both Love Actually and Elf were released in theaters. Elf was released like 20 years ago this weekend, I saw, or next weekend. Forgot that was a November release. Just makes you feel old.
I would have been like 12 when that movie came out.
You're not making me feel any better.
Okay.
You're not making me feel any better. But that'll do it for this week. You can check out the Marvels in theaters now. Captain Marvel is on Disney Plus, as is Miss Marvel, if you want to get some of the backstory. And we should probably shout out WandaVision, because the third part of the Marvels triumvirate, her backstory is all pretty much wrapped up in that series as well. So until then, we will see you guys at the movies.